Hey guys, Mark here from SeaWorld Earth, bringing you yet another instalment of my vlogs of a life spent with cameras. Okay, now today what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what I believe to be an oversight. I'm not going to say a failing, but I'm going to say an oversight with regards to one filter holder that I use at the moment. Now, as a landscape photographer, it's obviously very important to us to be able to use filters, have good filter systems. I use the Canny brand, awesome stuff. This is not a paid promotion of their product, okay, but it's just something to show you why I use them and what I believe to be maybe a better product. I've got two filter holders I'm going to show you today. One is from Canny, this one here on the right, and the other one is the proprietary filter holder from LAOWA. And I've also got that actually fitted to the lens it was intended for, which is the super wide 12mm f2.8. It's the lens that I use for a lot of my landscape photography, super wide, especially when it's got to do with the ocean. I try to cram as much water and motion into the images as possible, but that is my pretty much go-to ocean photography lens, and I use it also for Astro. Great lens for Astro. But there is what I believe to be a design failure in their filter holder, and that is going to be the point of this vlog. So bear with me, we're going to get these set up and I'm going to take you through a few of the positive points about both of these filter holders, sorry, but then I'll be showing and highlighting what I believe to be the Achilles tendon when it comes to the LAOWA filter holder. Okay, let's get into it. So to start off with the LAOWA filter holder, what I really like about this, one of the really nice features of it, I've actually got it, I'm using the LAOWA 12mm f2.8. It's what this filter holder is designed for. And what you'll notice on the lens is we've got this little red dot at the upper side of the lens where the entrance pupil marking is, and corresponding on the filter holder we've got another red dot. So all we do is we slide it on, we spin the filter holder through 90 degrees and you can feel it slip into place, and then we bring the red dot back to marry up with the red dot that's on the lens, and then we screw that down in place. Okay, now there's another retaining screw on this side, and that is to once we've got the position of our filter holder, we can screw that down, and once we've got the position sorted like that, okay, we can screw down the filter holder, and that way it just doesn't slide if it gets knocked. Okay, so it's on there quite solid. Another good feature is you've got the spinning rotating bezel here, and that is, if you want to, you can also fit a polarizing filter in front of the lens, and that then rotates independently from the ND filters. Okay, it's quite stiff, but once it gets going, it's not too bad. Okay, the fitting for this, I like it. It's slick, it's easy, it's fast, it's what you need when you're in the field. Fitting for what we've got also is the Canny filter holder, the HT100, but in order to fit that, it's a little bit more convoluted than the LAOWA, but still it's pretty straightforward. When you buy when you get the Canny filter holder, you have these step-up rings because you have different lenses, different filter sizes. So along with the filter holder, you get a 67 to 82, a 72 to 82, and a 77 to 82. Okay, this one is a 77 to 82 on the Tamron, 70 to 200. Okay, that's the step-up ring I need for this lens, and that quite simply, that just screws into a collar, okay, that will eventually marry up with the filter holder. Let me just screw that in. Hold on, bear with me. There we go. Okay, so that screws in. Okay, and once that's in place, all we then do is we attach that And once that ring is in place, all we need to do then is just introduce the main filter holder, and that is this one here. Okay, you've got a little arrow that you can pull out there, and you can see there's like a recessed circle area there. All you do is you turn that round. Okay, you fit that over one side like so, pull out that retaining spring here that's got a spring action, and then you just fit it over the collar and you're good to go. Okay. Likewise with the canny, you do have a mechanism in order to rotate a polarizer that can fit in front of the lens, and that is by rotating. There's a little control wheel on the side, and I find that a lot easier than trying to manipulate the top collar on the LAOWA. Okay, so canny actually make a small polarizing filter that fits specifically into here, very thin in its mount. Okay, and that then just sits in there, and it sits behind the ND filters should you need it, if you're shooting anything that's got a reflective or a wet surface, for example. Okay, so that's the two filters and how they fit. Here we can see both of the filter holders together. We've got the LAOWA and we've got the canny. Now the first thing that you'll notice, especially on the LAOWA, is it's very square. Okay, whereas on the canny you can see all of these angled areas here. Okay, all the way around. Okay, and that's because you can have either of the filter holders, you can place it how you want. You can have it this way or that way depending on the orientation of your lens. Okay, and it is this form factor, okay, that is basically what I can make out the make or break decision when you're looking at a filter or filter holder. Okay, and I will now explain why that is. Okay, so my shooting scenario, I've got my camera set up, I've got my canny filter holder in place. Okay, it's late in the afternoon. I don't want to use an extreme ND, so all I want to do is just tone down the light a little bit. I've decided I'm going to use an ND8. Okay, now because it's almost transparent, okay, an ND8 is only 3 stops of light. Okay, it reduces by a factor of 3 the amount of light going into the camera. A little bit of dust on there. Okay, now with the canny filter holder, quite simply, we can just place it into location, our fingers on the top shoulder here, and we know that it's covering the lens. Okay, from there, like I said, because we're using an ND8, we can see through that. We can put the solid filter on first, and then we can place our grad filter on the outside. And because, like I said, we can see through the ND8, we can then gauge and set the transition line for any graduated ND filter that we decide to use. Same thing. Okay, if I decided then with the canny system, if I wanted to use an ND1000 for example, I would first place in my grad filter, I'd set up my composition and place the transition line, and then quite simply behind the ND filter I would introduce my ND1000, and I know that once my thumbs arrive on that top shelf there, that everything's going to be covered. So with the canny system, it's pretty straightforward. This is the LAOWA. Okay, and you can see straight away that the form factor with this filter holder is very square. Okay, and this is where the problem is. Let's say, for example, we're going to go with that same scenario again, where we're going to use, we're going to use a graduated filter and a solid filter. We're going to start out with the same pairing that we had at the beginning. That is the ND8. Okay, with a soft grad. Okay, so let's say, for example, we want to put the ND8 in to begin with. Okay, so we slide it in from the top, and if we push down, okay, and our fingers arrive at the top of the filter holder, okay, as they do with the canny, because of the difference in the form factor of the canny with that lower shoulder, that allows me to marry up the filter and cover the opening for the front of the filter holder. Whereas you look here on the bottom with the LAOWA filter holder, I don't reach the bottom of the opening of where the port is, or where the lens looks out. So in order to be able to cover that completely, I need to push that filter down until it covers that whole area. Okay, now because I need to do that, I'm not going to be able to do that when I've got a grad in place. Okay, now because I've got a very opaque, or less, not so opaque filter in, the ND8, I can still look through the filter holder, or still look through the lens, and place the ND or the grad filter wherever I want that transition area to be on the graduated filter. Okay, this is what happens when I'm trying to use a much denser neutral density filter, such as the ND1000. Okay, same scenario, this is where the problem is. Okay, so same scenario, I want to use but now, as opposed to having the ND8, I want to use an ND1000. Okay, this is the problem in the gist of everything. Okay, so I remove my grad filter, I take out my ND8. Alright, now because of the form factor of this filter holder, I have to put my ND1000 in, and I've pushed it so that it covers the opening at the front of the port so that the lens can see out. Now my problem is, because I'm using such a thick, such a dark, almost welding glass like ND filter in the ND1000, how can I position the transition point of my grad filter? I can't see through the lens with enough ability in order to place accurately that transition point on my graduated filter. Okay, some people may say, okay, so go to live view, bump up your shutter speed, go to 30 seconds, pump up your ISO to 6400, and then on live view you should be able to see what's going on. The problem with that is that this is a manual lens, so there's no diaphragm. I can't use that live view option because it won't translate that information as if it was an electronically coupled lens. It's not. All I get for transmission between the camera and this lens is the shutter speed. My aperture is just 0,0. I can set the ISO, but on the aperture it doesn't. It's all just manual. So that's the big problem here, is that I can't use this form factor with graduated and solid ND filters, okay, because I just have no visual reference as to where my graduation filter is sitting once I've got the ND1000 in place. Right, so I find it quite difficult to understand that the manufacturer would make such a huge oversight in the form factor design of their own proprietary product. Now there is a way around it, but it's quite long-winded, but I'll show you that anyway. So my workaround for this particular problem is what I have to do. Unfortunately it's a bit laborious, but what I have to do is I have to put my graduated filter in first and do my composition. Okay, so I put that into location, and then what I do is I use what I call the rule of thumb. We've all heard the term, here it is. I use my thumb, and in relation to, I just gauge where the filter is in relation to my thumbnail. What I then have to do, unfortunately, is take the grad filter out, put the solid filter in, and then manipulate that until it is correctly covering the front of the lens. Okay, and then once that's done, I can then put my grad filter back into location and set it again to where it was on relation to my thumbnail. That, unfortunately, due to the form factor along the upper edge of the filter holder, is the only way that I can address this problem. So I'm hoping soon in the future that there will be a solution to this with either a revision of their own filter holder or a filter holder being produced by a third party.